Welcome to Between Data and Risk podcast. Today we'll be discussing data strategies. To discuss with us the details of data strategy approaches and the place of data within digital transformation, we'll be talking to Samir Sharma, CEO of Datazuum, a data strategy and analytics consultancy. Stay tuned. If you're a business owner or senior manager, you probably had more than enough about all the wonderful opportunities awaiting you in the era of digitalization.
Whether it is big data, cloud, data science, or whatever buzzword is currently trendy.
If you would like to hear someone dissecting these claims and showing you what it actually takes to improve business processes, you're in the right place.
This is Between Data and Risk, where we discuss real-life examples of what works and what doesn't in the world of business operations.
Hi, I'm your friendly neighborhood data guy, Dr. Marian, and with me is my co-host, Artur Cognition Shared Solutions Chief Risk and Strategy Officer.
Hello.
Welcome to this episode of Between Data and Risk. Today, we'll be talking about building and executing data strategies. And we're excited to have with us our guest, Samir Sharma, CEO of Datazuum, Data and Strategy Analytics Consultancy, who agreed to share his experiences with us. Hello, Samir.
Hello, and thank you both for having me on today.
Thank you for
Between
coming.
Data and Risk. It's an absolute pleasure. Good to see you both.
We are really excited because we talk about data a little,
Sure.
about risk a bit more, and we realize that both of these can be, let's say, implemented in a company in the framework of a good, well-prepared strategy. We had a couple of episodes on strategies, and every time we learn something new. We had an episode about digital strategy
Right.
not so long ago. And we wanted to start with asking you, what's the relation between digital and data strategy? How do they work each other? Where should you start? Where should you, what should you expect from one and from another?
It's a good question, and once again, thank you for having me on today. It's an interesting question because a couple of reasons. One, pure strategy. In terms of what you see from a business perspective, sits right at the top. And I think that's the overarching ability for us to understand where the business is going to be going, whether that's over a 10-year period, what objectives the CEO has, what goals they need to achieve, whether that's revenue growth, whether that's regulatory, whether that's customer, and so on. Then I always think about a set of underpinning strategies. And in my world, it's that there's lots of things should happen, but don't happen. If it was the utopian viewpoint that I would love to have, I wouldn't have anything called a digital or a data or a marketing or anything like that. I would have everything embedded into this business strategy, this overarching. But we are where we are today in terms of digital, data, marketing, operations, finance, and so on. So how do they connect? Up until about, maybe 20 years ago, we weren't even talking about digital strategy, right? We were talking about CRM, we were talking about ERP, we were talking about all these were digital type of approaches. We wanted to streamline processes. We wanted to implement new ways of working, whether that's ordering through an EDI type interface. In my early days working in the defense industry, that's what we were doing. We were, ordering through the sort of digital layer, the ether, which before was all done very manually and on paper. So that digital sense has always been there, right? It's never gone away. Yeah. So I think this whole thing about digital strategy and data strategy, they must be aligned. Yeah. One is about the digitization or enhancement of a process with a system that will improve the ways of working, collaboration, speed to market, supply chain, sorting out supply chain issues and so on, by easing the way that people work together along that supply chain. Through those digital mechanisms, what happens? There's an event. There's a point in time where something is created. There's a process that fires off something, which is a handoff between either a company and another company, or it's between a department and one department, or it's between a system and a system. That's all data. Mm-hmm. So for me, the two must be complementary. If we don't drive the two together, then we're going to be basically working in a vacuum. So digital and data have to be married. They have to be married, and they have to be married with themselves, and they have to be the servant to the business strategy or the corporate strategy. That's the way that I see it, because they're not the be-all and end-all, right? They're enablers for the business to drive what they need to do over a certain period of time. So for me, that's where they sit. That's why they need to be intertwined. One complements the other, and they must work in this real good rhythm of one works through the mechanics, the other one picks up that data, the other one says, what do we need to do with that data? How do we drive those objectives? And then they must work in sync. So you can never, one of the first things that we do when we walk into an organization is typically ask for the business strategy or the corporate strategy, whatever people talk about, whatever they've named it, the digital strategy, because there probably is one lurking about. Typically, we're there to do the data strategy. So, and then things like an enterprise architecture strategy, because there is that thing about how does the evolution of your systems, your approaches, your governance capabilities, how does that grow with digital and with data? And then we might look at other, they might have a finance transformation, which might be sitting separately from digital transformation. So all of those things all have data components. And that's what we always want to have a look at, to identify those similarities, to identify the crossovers, to identify where you can start to build, weave, and understand how data is going to help that process, drive that objective, deliver that insight, and so on.
So when you are...
I think it's worth pointing out now that, data strategy, because in a very narrow understanding of the concept, and way too narrow, and if you start kind of shouting me when I say it, I want to underline, I completely agree with you. A very narrow understanding of data strategy would be an IT department saying how we store the data, right?
Yes, absolutely, correct.
And a good data strategy is obviously much bigger. So let's start with describing who should actually own the data strategy, because I think this will be a nice starting point in defining the journey, because we've seen in our practice we've seen data strategies belonging to the ID department. Unfortunately, yes. that kind of happens sometimes. We've seen dedicated chief data officers who had a mission in the company shaped one way or another. We've seen a chief digital strategy officer owning both the digital strategy and the data strategy together, which might work. So what do you think is kind of the optimum executive setup where the data strategy should sit in the organization, and how should it kind of trickle down to optimize the mission of it?
Yep, good question. And I'm going to say 2 words: it depends. And the reason, and the reason is, I don't think there is any one specific answer. Now, if my experience of working with companies, both large, medium-sized, and some small, is dependent on where they are on that sort of value chain of maturity. Yeah. If it's an organization which is, if it's a medium-sized organization, which we work with, a number of them, I would say that, 50% of those organizations we work with are probably looking to hire somebody who's either at a head of data level or a head of data and analytics, maybe not a chief data officer, right? Because that's, there's too many chiefs right now. There's a chief for everything.
Not enough Indians.
Yeah, well, there you go. That's why you got me on. You walked into that one, Marian. You walked into that one.
Yes.
So you look like a beetroot now.
I need to reduce saturation a little. Excuse me for a second.
So look, I think there's obviously the factor that we need somebody owning this data strategy, like we do with the digital, And digital actually is normally owned by a CIO or a CTO, or, as you said earlier, maybe there's a chief digital officer. I don't see many of those these days. I see, the chief digital officer not being spoken about that much these days, which is interesting because it was the rage about 5 years ago. In terms of where the data strategy sits, in terms of if there isn't a chief data officer, it would sit then with that person who's the head of data and analytics, or the head of data, who would be traditionally in that kind of environment, probably either reporting into a COO or a CFO. That's where I've seen that happen and that occur. Sometimes one of my clients actually reports into the CEO, which is really interesting. Doesn't sit on that executive board level, but has the absolute enterprise view of how they are going to deliver data strategy, and has got the ear of the CEO and has got the understanding of how it's going to be done and so on. So I think where there isn't a chief data officer, then it must be aligned to, I think the really good place is the COO. I think obviously a CFO is good because they're the people with the money, but they're going to quantify it. They want payback, they want ROI, something that data people find it difficult to do. Well,
because it's a cost center.
But you've got to justify things, right? You just can't say this data strategy is going to deliver, something, and you don't put a number on it. ROI and cost benefit needs to be there, regardless of whether it's the COO or the CFO. Obviously, both will have. COO wants to deliver, wants to operationalize, wants to get things done, wants to be leaner, wants to get stuff to market quicker. So wants people to do their jobs more efficiently. So there's all those drivers. And they need to understand that the data strategy needs to be strategic in its view, with an operational lens, but essentially must have that attachment to the business strategy and and I think what the CEO wants to do. And I think that's where the glue kind of sits. So, I mean, to your point, if there's no chief data officer, if there's no chief data and analytics officer, and they don't want to hire somebody in that space, then you're going to get ahead of, or one of my clients is the group head of data, for example. So I think this is for me, but it still needs to have a C-suite enabler, a C-suite sponsor. Because you can't do it bottom up. You need that top-down facilitation.
Absolutely. It's actually very aligned with our approach, where we connect, let's say, processes with data and with risk. And COO is our natural, let's say, partner in discussion, because it's all about operations, and the data is used in the context of processes.
Correct.
And of course, CFO is always good to have ear of. But the COO is our main partner, because the data, in my experience, data which is not used in processes to mainly drive decisions is just a cost. It's not an element of a cost center. It's just a cost.
It's not a value, right?
I think half percent of the collected data is ever analyzed statistically. And utilized probably even a percentage of it. So,
correct.
But the question that it drives me too is, okay, so we know that we have this head of data, chief information officer, head of data connected to COO, CFO, or CEO. But who should be also involved in the development of the data strategy? You mentioned that the data strategy should be intertwined with digital strategy, with this financial change strategy and business strategy. So, if I'm a senior manager or CEO, and I hired this head of data, and now he's sitting, let's say, in the office next to mine on my right hand. Now, who should he have access to be able to develop a good data strategy?
Yeah, all of the executives enterprise-wide. Yeah, that's the first thing. I wouldn't expect them to be sitting in their office working on this without working through the realities of the different business functions, but pinning it always back to what the drivers are. So, let me give you an example of a strategic objective. Many people will put in front of me a set of strategic objectives. They would say, we want growth, or we want to increase revenue, or we want to reduce headcount, or we want to increase conversions and marketing. Well, that's great, but there's nothing that tells me by how much, by when, by what percentage. These are the things that need to be teased out in order to get a real set of good objectives. Okay, and those objectives are going to be underpinned by each and every different business function. Every business function will have their own way of helping, supporting, and driving those strategic objectives, which the CEO has stated and the board has signed off. So the particular head of data, chief data officer, whatever it might be, is working with those individual business functions at an executive level to begin with, to ask them, in the frame of reference, what does that mean for your part of the organization? How would you be able to influence, say, take an easy thing. If they went to the CMO, for example, the chief marketing officer, and one of the pillars in this particular strategy was we would like to increase customer acquisition in region X by 10% by December 2023. That's a specific thing. So now that person can craft the idea and understanding of the CMO needs to look at current customers, needs to look at current conversions, needs to look at what acquisition models they're building, needs to understand what that region looks like. Maybe they have to do a similar type of understanding of another region to see what products they have been developed, what products have been bought. This is all data driven, right? I'm using that word, which I don't, but this is all data informed. And so now that chief data officer or head of data has got a much better understanding of the business questions that they're asking, the decisions they need to make, the actions they need to take in order to drive that acquisition and the target. Over time, so every single function will have a way of being able to deliver on those promises that the CEO has. So starting there, and I'll finish in a moment. Starting at that level then allows you to move further down the chain. But once you've got the view of what the executive needs are, then the executive says, now you need to go and speak to so-and-so to go and develop this further and really understand how we're going to operationalize it. So for me, a strategy must sort of be in both camps. It must be in the strategic view. It must have an operational lens as well. Because when you deliver it, you need to understand people, capabilities, systems, and can we deliver it? It's no good in saying, oh, this is what we're going to do, and there's no connection with the operational sphere of the business. So I think you've got to have that enterprise view, but with a understanding of how you're actually going to achieve that. And I see a lot of strategies that don't have the sort of the layer further down of, okay, if we do this, how are we going to achieve it? What are the strategies that we're going to use? And how are we going to actually deliver that in a pragmatic and affordable and realistic roadmap?
We've seen it.
That's the structure that you described, because what if I understand correctly, you describe currently a very top-down approach of delivering the data strategy.
Correct.
Don't you think that that obviously it will work if the CEO has a very clear vision, and with the head of data, they can work out a very clear vision of where the company can deliver the value of data, and they're just passing that vision onto the teams. But a lot of the enterprises that we've seen, they start at a place where they're very diverse and what's the correct word? Kind of very 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 non-uniform in the way they store the data, in the way they analyze the data, in the maturity. It's not like the organization has a data maturity. The different parts of the organization are in completely different
places. Different maturities. Correct.
Yeah. In this case, putting a top-down approach might kind of result in a situation where the more mature have to be brought down, kind of, and almost asked to do things a bit again, and the less mature parts need to very quickly catch up. Don't you think a bit more, asking each one to first catch up to a certain common level, bringing it a bit bottom up, and asking them where they see the data going? I know it risks a bit of splintering, but
sure.
what are your thoughts on this?
I think you're right about that. What we don't do is we don't go in and say, right, everybody has to start here. Yeah, and you're right. There are going to be some that are going to have better capabilities than others, and what we will tend to work with is get an understanding first, because what we don't want to do is to go down into the dungeons and start there and say, right, we've got so much complexity here, because this area has got 7 systems that they use. This area has got 3 systems that they use. This area has got no systems. So we tend to sort of do that as a second factor. First, we want to understand vision, because we need to connect. Yeah, we need to connect to the business strategy. And this is the point about always connecting to the business strategy. If we don't do that initially, people will go too far below, and they will struggle to rebuild that back up to the sort of the strategic point. So we would typically start there, understand that vision, the idea of where everything is happening, because ours is a business-driven data strategy. Yeah, as you said earlier, there are technology data strategies, which I don't agree with, because it should be business informed. Once you've got that understanding, then we do things like data capability assessments. And those assessments are done at the second level, because we're now getting into more detail with those operational teams. That operational perspective will give us an understanding of skill sets, capabilities. So the usual thing, people, process, technology, right? How are people doing things today? What's the cultural view of how they're working? This is a really important factor, because if you look at most of the surveys that come out now, New Vantage Partners, Randy Bean and his crew come out in, over the last 10 years with surveys about data and the executive pool. And, from that executive pool, what we're seeing is, and from, those companies, over 100 companies that are, what we're seeing is that while they're investing a huge amount in technology, data governance, tools, etc., what they're finding is that the biggest impediment to any kind of data transformation, even digital, I'm sure, is people, culture, and change management. So this is why we start up at the top. Then we come down to that data capability. And our data capability assessments, people and culture is one of the top things that we do because of those factors. Because we've seen time and time again, many people miss this. So we go through processes, of course. We look at data activities. We look at technology. We look at leadership. We look at all of that. We understand what those different teams are doing. But essentially, they're splintered. They're doing different things at different varying points, at different levels of maturity, because some are, shadow analytics or shadow BI or whatever it might be, because they are frustrated. So it's not about bringing people down to a level, back down to where they are. It's about improving them, and some will be catching up. Some will need to be treated in a way that's step by step, because they don't understand the value that they can get out of data. Others might, because they've accelerated that. They really know, maybe in, I don't know, finance. Finance really understands data. They've got to drive out their P&L, but they also want to understand efficiencies and so on. So they're using different kinds of data. Maybe some of the operations teams are. So we need to leverage good capability internally. We need to understand where things are working well. Maybe that translation of what's working well can be used in other areas. So it's not about going in and saying, right, let's bust everything down. No one's going to do it like this anymore. We need to learn how the organization lives and breathes. Because if there is a function that's doing it really well, and they're doing it really well, and you can see they're having successes, well, why not translate that and see if that works elsewhere? So what I'm saying is, there is already a culture and ways of working in an organization. What I don't want to do is to go in and say, you must all stop doing that, because that would slow down. That would make them skeptical. It would probably cost more in the long run, and the CEO will be very disappointed. So I think that the initial viewpoint is get the vision, understand the strategy, and then speak to the people down below, and then understand how that can be brought up to a certain level, and then drive out those inconsistencies to get people to a level. But it takes time. It's not going to be overnight. And that's where there's complexities in organizations, because they've invested so much in many different tools. And sometimes you will have to standardize. And that's just something that the company's going to have to think about.
I would like to ask about, because I love what you're saying, because this is something that we do too, is focusing on what's really happening on the business level. Mm-hmm. And these data strategies, which are technology oriented, are sometimes very hard to work with, because I would like to ask you, because this is a trend that we see, is let's create this self-serve analytics environments, and the future will be bright and shiny and pink and fluff and plush. I just would like to ask your opinion about creating a data strategy. Let's get all the data into a big data lake, put on it, I don't know, Power BI, and boom.
And let everybody go crazy.
Yes, yeah. Exactly.
All I can say is I would close my book and say good luck. Look, I think data democratization, self-service, those words that have been used and pushed around in our industry for a long time have created havoc. I'm not saying that they're not good things, but they have led to detrimental things happening. And one of those things which it's caused is the idea of data literacy. So in order for us to be able to give people many different, like you said, let's just chuck our data into a data lake, put whatever visualization tool on top, and let everybody have access to it, and let them run wild. From my perspective, there's nothing wrong with that, but you need to set it up in a particular way. Yeah, it's not about the Wild West. We've got to have proper processes in place. We've got to have a fundamental of understanding of not everybody in the organization is going to go and want to play with data, right? This is a common theme that I hear, but we should give it to everybody. But really, does everybody need? Some people just want to have a specific piece of insight, and they need that to drive out a particular decision. Some people will want to absolutely have a little bit more flexibility, because their area might be more dynamic. They are looking externally and they're trying to work out what the environment, the external factors are. What's the impact from regulation? What's the impact from the environment? What's the impact from, the economy and so on? So there might be certain things that they might need. Say, for example, that could be the strategy office. They will need to have a little bit of dynamic views of that. Not everybody is going to want to be exploring the data all day, bringing in large data sets and building models. I don't think that's going to happen, right? I think people, essentially, there's what people need for their day-to-day, and that could be a piece of insight. It could be data that's delivered to a decisioning system that helps them in their process. And you said it earlier on. I believe that most people who will create a data strategy don't really understand processes. And therefore, to me, a process delivers the data. It's beautiful because that actually works within that context. I need to know what happens when this piece of data is generated. Does anybody need to know that there's some insight here, there's value? Can we measure it? Can we provide that to that person instantly? Can we help them to make that next decision along that process? So, all of those things are really, really important. That needs to be set up. So I think fundamentally there will always be specific things that business departments, functions, what lines of business, whatever we want to call them, will need, either day-to-day, week-to-week. And they could be delivered through common systems like a visualization tool. Some will be delivered through maybe a model, which will go into a decisioning system. Some may just be, some don't even need to see, a trend or a specific, where are we now in terms of last week. So it really depends, and that's why I think you've got to understand how does the business make money, what is the process by which they do that, and how can we help them to deliver insight when they need it at the right time. So to me, that's more push. Self-service sounds like it's more I'm pulling a bit of data and I'm trying something and I'm going to see if it works, and then I bring my bias into it and I bring my my confirmation bias and so on. So I think we should be absolutely delivering some perspective of insight that is standard, that is what's required, and all the time. And then there is going to be innovation. There is going to be ad hoc stuff. There is going to be, things that will come up, and there's a place for that. And I think that will need deeper thinking. It will need more resources. It might need different capabilities, but it will always need to be working around that business process or that business and that business function, that line of business. It's not someone sitting in a bunker somewhere working on a model in the dark, and they love it because it's great. But actually, the business person has no idea what they're doing, because it actually doesn't add value to them. So I think, I'm not saying democratization isn't great, but it's really fundamentally messed up a lot of the organizations that have tried to do that over time. Even self-serve, you've got to train people. You've got to get them to understand. And is it the job of every business individual to now suddenly be a data analyst? No, it's not.
Absolutely not.
Yeah, it's not. They need to do their particular job. So
you've mentioned a whole spectrum of kind of approaches, and yes, probably going into any any extreme, as with anything, is not good. If you have a central data science team that works complete isolation of business, it wastes money, not delivering business value. If you have business people doing whatever they think they're doing with data, they're probably just again flapping in the dark. But an interesting concept I've seen in one of my previous working places was the idea of commando teams, that they were called. They're very kind of who sit with the business and deliver under the direction of the business very quick kind of analytics solutions, which then, if they prove to be useful, they get pushed out into the central analytics.
Correct.
So there's a whole spectrum of approach. I see Marian making a face here. Go on, Marian.
I think there's
I'm making a face because Commando team is good and nice and dandy. Probably there are environments where it works, but you know that as an author or co-author of Data Mesh in Action, I believe in constant cooperation between business and data people. So one of the fundamentals that I believe are important, you don't need to have a data mesh on itself, but what you should have cooperation between business people and data people. And this
Correct.
is something that I think should be included in every strategy. And one of the things that I love about data mesh is that it puts so much emphasis on it, because if you have a Commando team, they come in, they have limited time to understand your part of the business, when they have limited time to develop some models, which from my data science experience is not always that quick. And then they have limited time to iterate it, and they are running away. If your strategy, if you have a big enough company, of course, is that your business function has its own data team, like domain-oriented data team, they have time to learn, they have time to digest, understand, test, iterate, yada yada. So this is close to my heart, is like, let's get these data people from the ivory tower, throw them into the dungeon, and if they survive there, then hey ho, everybody will profit.
Yeah, I'd like to say that's the optimum approach in terms of how we would work. So here's my question: is a data person and a business person, are they two different people? Are they two different entities? Do they work for the same organization? Aren't they just business people?
I like it.
It depends on maturity of the data, of the business people, of their data literacy, right?
But Marian just used a really, really interesting thing, which I sometimes say. Data people are elevated to a particular position because it's now data. We are the data people. We know what's best. Actually, we're all business people. We all collaborate. We all work together. We're all dynamically working together for a purpose. I have seen, I have seen where data people aren't working towards a purpose, and we've built various tools for those reasons, so that data analysts and data scientists, or visualization developers, can really understand. Oh, I see. Why am I doing this? Why? First, we have to answer that question, and then you can build. And then you can do the how and whatever it is, But it's the why and the what, and then you can go away. If they don't get that, they build, and it's gonna go nowhere.
I've seen it in Fortune 500 companies that brilliant people building amazing models. And they can chunk the data in unbelievable way, predict the things that are really hard to spot, and okay, what's the business use? Oh, yeah. But look, this is this parameter, and the accuracy of the prediction. Wait, no. Data use. What is the business? The business use.
Yes.
So they were absolute ivory tower. And when I asked them why they don't speak to business people, it was like, oh no, it's too time consuming. I need to explain it to them. It's like, so you just spent half a year building this model, and now you can just flash it down the turn and nobody will notice the difference?
Yeah. So you're right, and I think this is one of the falsities that's being perpetuated in this term data literacy. And I won't be popular by saying this, right? We can't go around to business people saying they're data illiterate. I don't get that.
Absolutely not.
Right?
No.
We need to be.
Just one. Yeah. I always say to our consultants, be humble. These people are operating the business. This business is working.
And they've been doing it for so long.
It's fine. Now you learn how they do it. And if you can improve it using data, the better.
Yes.
But you're there first to learn how come that these people who are using Excel spreadsheets, paper notebooks, they have working business. Be humble. You're a consultant hired in a company, and they are operating the working business.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Correct. No. I agree. So I think there's a level of what data teams need to learn is business literacy. They need to understand. One of the things I was on speaking to data analysts for part of the it's an apprenticeship last week. And the organization asked me, would you talk about, data strategy and so on? I said, sure. One of the questions that came up is, what, as an entry junior data analyst, what do I need to know? I am sure they're probably thinking, do I need to learn R? Do I need to learn Python? Do I need to learn a visualization tool? Do I need to know SQL, et cetera, which is good, right?
Linear regression, machine learning, yada, 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 yada.
But you know,
you need to know
learn
business.
learn how the business works, learn the processes, sit with the teams and understand, you know, end to end what that business does. How does the business make money? Is it through products? Is it through services? Is it, you know, what is it that they build in, and how does that get to market? What do they do to serve those customers? Understand those things. And then learn business literacy, learn language, learn the way that they speak, understand how, you know, whether it's financial terms or whether it's manufacturing terms or whether it's, you know, operational, whatever that might be, learn it, because you need to speak to them like that. They can only, you know, you can't speak to them in.
There's one more thing about the language, and this is something that we also, especially when working with data mesh and creating these domains, if you don't understand this language, you will not be able to check if what happens in the domain next to you is providing you in terms of data. And this is a huge bottleneck, that you don't have this lack of ubiquitous language. It's disastrous. I've seen models built on the data, which was, let's say, the column name or the variable name was the same, but the meaning was completely different.
Completely different. Yes.
Oh, we have connected, harmonized this data. I said, no. You didn't harmonize this data. And you didn't understand that this timestamp is this is a timestamp of production, and this is timestamp of delivery, and these are completely different timestamps.
Yeah, I was having the same conversation. I was having the same conversation with a client yesterday, with the client's team. Exactly the same conversation about how we're putting this new operating model in for them, and so we're having the same conversation about, you know, if we get a type of data product request, how do we know? How does the business person know where that data is, in what column or which table, or what the description is? So, you know, these are the things that, as you say, business definitions. You know, that goes down to that level. How do we define customer? How do we define particular entities? So absolutely. But I think if you drive it that way, if you really get to know the business, that's easier, because then they're gonna accept that you are going to create value, but you need to drive it from a business view rather than from a technology view. Don't come there and say, I want to build a data dictionary. Well, that doesn't mean anything to them. Yeah.
What?
I want to, you know, if somebody said, I want to have a business terms glossary, okay, all right, business terms. Yeah, business terms. I understand that. And a glossary, of course I understand, because I've read a book. There's always a glossary. And then you can sit down and understand, you know, what are the definitions. So you're right. Yeah, absolutely. A fourth thing tacked onto the end of that, which is perfect. But it is about that language. And I think that's the important factor of how the collaboration, how you know, that ease of a conversation, how they will understand. So when you ask that question, do you really mean this? Or, you know, and then you can challenge slightly. But until then, if you don't know, you're just making assumptions, and you're walking away from that conversation with one type of thinking, and they're walking out of the room saying, great, I'm going to have what I need. But they won't meet.
Yeah, and it comes back to this culture, right? And the culture of defining what, you know, and the collaboration between the business. And it's funny, I'm going to use a term that will probably date me a lot, but, you know, many years ago, probably 20 or 25 or 30 years ago, when I was watching a program about expert systems. Anyone remember?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Expert systems. And wonderful.
You know, back then, even the primary thing that I still remember as being underlined is that very often when expert systems were built, you go to an expert and ask them, why did you do that, or why did you make a decision? And the person says, because that's my expert knowledge, right? And it's again, the data person goes completely wild-eyed because they don't understand, because they don't have the data. The expert person thinks they know, because they've been doing it for God knows how many years, right? So, and again, the cooperation between the data people who know an algorithm, they know the data, they know all the methodologies, and the business person who's just been doing it. And they may not think why they're doing it, why they just been doing it. This is their intuition, translating that intuition, common culture.
You're right, and I think there is common culture, but within that common culture, we have moved on. I mean, in terms of compute power,
Hopefully.
processing, we have, and I think what generally, when you talk about expert systems and decision, I still remember looking at decision support systems and calling it that before decision, then decision science, and then later data science came, about. But if we actually are able to educate each other on how does this work, be curious to understand, and then again in the language that the data person doesn't need to say, well, I'm going to put it through a JSON file, and I'm going to put extract that and put it into Azure. I'm going to do X, Y, Z, and blah blah blah. Business person doesn't care. Help them understand something, and they will help you understand it, but in plain English. You see, or whatever language that is available. So I think these are the aspects that we have to help each other. This is not just about the data people saying the business people don't know anything, or the business people saying the data people don't know anything. It's more about that collaboration. It's language, and lots of ways that to help that process. Just to build up common understanding of what you want to do, how you want to do it, where you want to head to. As I said earlier, the tools that we've developed, because we've seen this. We've seen people arguing across tables, about, I don't understand you. Just give me the data and I'll do whatever I want with it. Well,
I have two questions. One is because we spoke about the need of the cooperation. Like, can you encode it in the strategy somehow, and what's the best way to make it? Because it's something which very often seems like soft and cultural. Like, does it have place in data strategy? Like, people talk to each other. Like, what is it a policy level? Is it the goal level? How do you practically? Because we try to be practical here. What's the practical way?
Yeah, the practical way. So let's be practical. So when I first started looking and thinking about this development, how do we get people to embrace each other in a way that is through a common language? I created something called a data strategy canvas. This canvas will help articulate those conversations in a way that is from a level playing field. So we all talk about it every day. We talk about, and you see it written in every paper, data is there to support decision making, but it is never really implemented. Okay? It's never really, it's always then about the technology. Data should be driving decision making on every single document I've read in my entire life. But actually the reality is most requirements don't come from a decision point of view. So in 2014, working with a client who had many of these issues, I basically said to that client, after being in a meeting where people weren't speaking to each other correctly, they were almost, kind of having arguments about what was available. We had data people showing business people big data models, right? Why would, lots of boxes with lots of crow feet, and relationships and blah, blah, blah. In the most minuscule, they just exploded their data warehouse and said, this is the data model. A business person is going to look at that and say, I don't care about that, right? So there had to be a different way. I thought about it. I said, there has to be a different way. So I went out of that meeting and I said, look, we need to stop this meeting. And I created a decision framework, a decision-based view of how we actually work on a level playing field, which will help us have those practical, as you said, conversations. And so if you think about when you have a strategic objective, which, if I go back to that example, I want to increase customer acquisition by 2020, but by 10% in this particular region by the end of 2023. Okay, we've got something, right? Now, based on that, What decisions do we need to make in order to get to that point? And we sort of go backwards. We reverse engineer everything rather than saying, oh, to do that, what data do we need? That doesn't make sense to me because it's not implicit in the way that I actually am forming my opinions about what data I will eventually need. Yeah. So most people will start data up. I start actions and decisions down. Yeah. So if we reverse engineer, we start from that action, decision, business question. That derives and gives us enough understanding of what the business needs to do and how they need to operate, what actions they need to take. In that, is the action to create a model that's going to help me understand the segmentation of these X amount of people in that region, and what, can we predict perhaps what products they might buy based on this particular region that is very much similar. So lots of things that those actions and the decisions I need to take is where do I invest, in creating that? What capabilities do I need? Do I need to upskill people in order to do that? So it's those kind of decisions, but then eventually it must be action oriented, right? But the business questions underneath that is, who are my customers? Where are they? What's their lifetime value in that region? How much have they bought from us? Do they buy other products that might be similar to, to what we, all of those types of questions that we're trying to understand. You could be looking at environmental factors in that particular region. You could be looking at the regulation in that, if it's, a particular region which has an autonomous government. You might be looking at very different privacy laws, whatever that might be. But you're then asking questions. Now, I always look at it in two ways. There's business questions that are performance related, because I want to know what happened yesterday, what happened today. Am I performing well? Am I doing the right things? Blah, blah, blah. Then there's the things that are the analytic questions, which are going to be my more predictive views. Who is going to buy my product? How do we know that there's going to, there's how can we predict churn in that area, and so on and so forth. So these are the kinds of, and actually, when you start to talk about it like that, then you've got a view of, so you're telling me you're asking that question because you need to get that decision to that point of that decision. Even if you build a decision tree, that's great. Then you need to take those actions. Wonderful. Do you know what? Now I can go and do some discovery on whether we've got that data. Isn't that a better way of doing it? Rather than saying, let's just go get the data and work out what we want to do. That doesn't make sense to me. So now you're the funnel is doing that. Rather than starting at the broad view of data, you're funneling it from that specific top level view, and you're getting to the data that you need, the data that you have, or the data that you need to go and get because you don't have it, or
Absolutely.
create because it's coming in a system. So you've already started to deliver value because you're understanding the business. You know what questions they're asking. You might be challenging those because you might be saying, based on my understanding of the business, and because I've spent time with the business now and I understand processes, are you sure you're asking the right question? Would it not be like, this might be the question. Oh, that's really, so now you start to get a trust-based view because the analyst or the data person is now speaking in the language of the business. So you're instantly getting connections, yeah? Because it's not based on technology or systems or tooling or R or Python or whatever it might be. I'll stop right there. But that's my
it's what you're saying is exactly the thing that we've been preaching, and we add one more component underneath this, and this is risk management, because going from action to the business, it does give you the process, but then to enable people to actually go into this freely. You also define what are the parameters in which you can operate.
Yes.
So that your action based on the decisions is within a framework that everyone feels comfortable with.
So great point, Artur, because because those are just the first three boxes of the canvas that I've talked about. There's a sort of, those are, I call them above the line, and then below the line are internal factors, the ways of working, the culture, the processes, and so on. But external factors, risk areas in the economy, risk areas in government, new policies that have been driven out, environmental factors if I'm an energy company, lots of different things. So those could be the risk factors that you're trying to understand. That's below the line because those are things that we might need to go and ask and define. And then there's, we talk about monetization, in that framework as well. Doesn't mean I'm selling a data set, but it means how do we eventually, can we monetize some aspects of this? Is there something that we can do here which is different to what we think? Do we drive out new business models? So it's really interesting the way that you can start to dynamically think about this in a way that, one, you're right, comes from a external or internal risk-based view and put those parameters in. But two, can we push the envelope here and innovate somewhere? Because innovation you can't innovate on everything,
But we have an episode on innovation with Richard Turin, who is a big promoter of innovation labs.
Yeah.
And he spoke a lot about structuring the innovation. So it's not like with self-serve analytics. So it's not self-serve innovation, but like creating this safe spaces for let's say, defined risk and defined product setup. So this is like a completely different topic. I'm not sure.
So,
let me ask one more question just to kind of round it out, because I think there's a very practical thing that we can also mention. You mentioned the metrics that define the success of the business and how data can measure those metrics. How would you then define metrics for the success of the data strategy? If you want to either go into a company and see if their data strategy is working, or if you've done a data strategy and you want to be measured whether what you've done is actually benefiting the company, how would you do that?
So we have a measurement tool that goes from strategic objectives all the way down to the level of measuring, was that the right decision we took? Was it the right action? Was it the right outcome? Was it the right business question? Down to, because there's more to that. Once you've got that angle, then you're saying, well, now we need to go and see where the data is. Do we have the right quality? Do we have the right dimensional data? Do we have the right, external data? And you can qualify that. You can measure that over time, because dependent on the outcome, those feedback loops are always going to occur. And it's not about us saying, right, we built it and we've delivered it. The success is how do we get that feedback loop right back to the strategic objective? But we also need different feedback loops in the middle of that process. If we don't have that, then we lose a big chunk of insight, because it could have been the wrong data. It could have been the wrong question, So we're asking, was that the right question?
And I remember the feedback loops that you've mentioned. You posted an excellent picture of this on LinkedIn.
Yes, that was the picture.
I will, if you don't mind, I will link the picture in the description to the episode.
Please do.
Because I think it was an excellent illustration of the concept of how you actually measure this. I think this was an excellent discussion and a lot of very practical points mentioned here. A lot of very, very good pointers. If people want to learn more about what Datazuum does and about your ideas, what's the best way to reach you?
Sure. www.datazuum.com. That's DATAZUUM.com. You can hit me up on LinkedIn. I'm a regular poster, as you've seen. I talk a lot about data strategy, obviously, data transformation. So you can hit me up on that, connect with me, follow me. You can email me, Samir@datazuum.com. That's good enough, I think.
Brilliant. And as I said, I will take some of the posts that you've selected, which particularly kind of hit me as illustrating the points. I will add them to the link in the episode, so anyone who listens to us will be able to.
Thank you for sharing them. I think everybody benefits from it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And thank you for sharing the experience with us. I think it was very good and very practical. And as always, let's hope it was of use to someone.
Thank you for listening.
Also, don't miss the next one. We'll be talking to Mandar Joshi, angel investor and media producer, who will explain to us the concept of integrated incubators and how they benefit startup development.
Subscribe on your favorite podcast platform or visit bda.show to find out more about future episodes and guests. You can also check out Cognition.llc for more information on Cognition Shared Solutions, our services, and other events hosted by us.
For now, it's thank you from myself, Artur Guja, and my co-host, your friendly neighborhood data guy, Dr. Marian.
Thank you and goodbye.